Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. First, we have Mexico President Sheinbaum creates universal health service guaranteeing healthcare to all citizens by 2027, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's a cross post from the underreported news subreddit. And it looks like, I guess there's a guy saying that like a TikTok or something. It looks like the link's from the deepdive.ca or whatever. And yeah, personally, I think if the government does want to pay for healthcare, they should be able to, but I do think it should be funded by voluntary taxation. If people want to have the government pay for healthcare through voluntary taxation, they should be able to, but I don't think that people should be forced to have the government pay for healthcare if they don't want to. Same with everything else. Also, I think the private sector does need to be an option as well. People should have as many options as possible when it comes to anything, and that includes health insurance, But of course, Reddit, they want state-mandated universal healthcare, and I personally don't think that's very libertarian. I think the libertarian position is you need as many choices as possible. You shouldn't have state-mandated healthcare or private-mandated healthcare. If you want to choose state healthcare and want to pay for it for voluntary taxation, I think you should be able to. If you want to choose private healthcare, I think you should be able to. If you want to choose no healthcare, I think you should be able to. Ultimately, it should be up to each individual person what they want to choose when it comes to healthcare. Same with everything else. Next, we have Trump orders Strait of Hormuz blockade, threatens to indirect vessels. Posted by Jerry Porcupine. That looks like a truth from Donald Trump who truthed. So there you have it. The meeting went well. Most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. Effectively, immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At some point, we'll reach an all being allowed in to go in, all being allowed to go out basis. But Iran is not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about them. This is world extortion, and leaders of countries, especially the United States of America, will never be extorted. I've also instructed our Navy to seek and indirect every vessel in the international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one will place an illegal toll of safe passage from the high seas. We will also begin destroying the mines and the Iranians laid in the straits. Any Iranian who fires at us or peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. Iran knows better than anyone how to end the situation, which has already devastated their country. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Their anti-aircraft and radar are useless. Khomeini and most of their quote-unquote leaders are dead, all because of their nuclear ambition. The blockade will begin shortly. Other countries will be involved in this blockade. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion. They want money, and more importantly, they want nuclear. Additionally, and at an appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded, and our military will finish up this little left of Iran, President Donald J. Trump. And yeah, personally, I don't really think the government should be doing that. I don't think they should have gone to war for Iran in the first place, I would say. But ultimately, the government can justify whatever it wants to justify, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. If Trump wants to have the Navy blockade Iran, ultimately, he is the commander-in-chief, so ultimately that's his decision. Personally, I don't really think he's the one making the decisions. He's really just the one just schizo posting on social media to keep people distracted, I would say, a lot of the time, and it's really probably just the generals making the decisions. But I guess what, personally, I think, the U.S. position should be get out of Iran as soon as possible, rather than get into another forever war there. But, that's very much how a lot of the U.S. military works. They always say, we're just going to go in and go out, but it always ends up being a forever war, with a few exceptions, like the Venezuela from a couple months ago, I guess I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Canadian PM Carney says the delays of spending 70 cents of every dollar in U.S. defense spending are over and gets a standing ovation, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the TikTok French subreddit, which looks like it's since been removed by the moderators of that subreddit. So yeah, personally, I would agree that the U.S. shouldn't be spending 70 cents of every dollar in U.S. defense spending, but, ultimately the U.S. can throw money, taxpayer money, wherever it wants to, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Carney, of course, is one to talk. He's not even an American. He has his own authoritarian country to deal with, and, so I personally think the libertarian position is, you shouldn't be, having the U.S. spend endless on defense, but ultimately the U.S. can spend endless money on whatever it wants to, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have disbelief and disappointment, how Javier Milei's bribery scandal may have derailed Argentina's crypto investment from TheGuardian.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they said, call logs additionally show that the president communicated with Novelli at least 5 times in the midst for his promotion of money sign Libra. At the time of the calls, Novelli was in Texas with colleagues involved in the Libra project, including an American crypto entrepreneur and spokesperson for Libra, whom Milei had allegedly agreed to name as an advisor for the terms of the financial agreement. And yeah, personally, I think Javier Milei is probably one of the better politicians on the world stage these days. But regardless, it just goes to say that all politicians are kind of corrupt and are naturally going to act in their own interests, regardless of how libertarian or not they are. And that's why I think the libertarian position is, you can't have, since people are going to act in their own self-interest rather than the interest of the state. Ultimately, what we need is just get rid of the state entirely, because the state's going to be entirely made up of individuals who are going to act up in their own self-interest rather than the interest of the people. Maybe there would be an exception here and there, like Thomas Massey or Ro Khanna, but regardless, the special interest groups and backroom deals always seem to win, and I think that's very much a feature rather than a bug. And these people, as I said, are going to act in their own self-interest rather than the interest of those who they claim to serve. Next, we have 2026 Needs This, LOL, posted by China Military Secrets, and that looks like a meme. It's like two FBI or other law enforcement agents, and they say, should they make another Gremlins movie? And then it's a gremlin with the Snickers logo on me says, and who do you think would win, cops or gremlins? And I guess, personally, if they want to make another Gremlins movie, I think they should be able to. Ultimately, I think the libertarian position is, make whatever movie or what you want as long as, you're not hurting anyone else. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, Viktor Orban concedes defeat as Hungary's tease the party heads for election win from NBCNews.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't really care too much for Viktor Orban. He was in power for too long. But, it just goes to show you that, you can be in power for forever. But, ultimately, elections might hold you accountable sometimes. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is, ultimately, elect whoever you want to. But, regardless of which party wins, the government's always going to have its own interest at heart. So, it's just going to be either stabbed in the front or stabbed in the back. Viktor Orban was more about stabbing people in the front. Well, I think this new guy will just be more stabbing people in the back, and that's very much how government works a lot of times, either stabbed in the front or stabbed in the back, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have an overview of the legal theory posted by Real Draw 4713, and that's a cross post from the Libertarian Teen Sub, and that's a quote that looks like they said, I urge you all to read this overview of the anarcho-capitalist legal theory that I recently wrote on my website. Check it out, and they link to their article on their website, ANCAP Legal Theory for BrexitNow7.wordpress.com. And yeah, personally, I think the only thing that really matters when it comes to law and legal theory is that those in the positions of legal authority are going to be able to justify whatever they feel like, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it since they're in a position of authority and you aren't. And that's how a lot of life works. People are going to be able to justify whatever they feel like, and oftentimes, there's nothing you can do about it. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, do you trust that they have America's best interest at heart, posted by Acadian Academic, and that looks like a picture of Jared Kushner, some other guy. I don't know who the other guy is off the top of my head. But yeah, personally, I don't think anyone really in the government, with maybe a few exceptions like Thomas Massey or Ro Khanna, really have the people's best interest at heart. They're going to have their own best interest at heart first and foremost, and that's very much how people work. People are inherently self-interested, and that's why I don't think we should have positions of government authority to begin with, because people are going to abuse their positions of government authority to benefit themselves first and foremost, and that's how it is regardless of which branch of the Uniparty is in power. Next we have Trump responds to Iranian blockade of Strait of Hormuz by blockading it, from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that, but ultimately, the state can justify whatever it wants to justify, and, oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next we have Pretty Much, and that's what post from Gen Z's Energy. It's a meme, MAGA Republicans, and it's that one meme of the woman looking disgusted. It says, automatically registering you to vote, and then she looks a little more, I'm not disgusted at the next thing, I'm automatically registering for war. And yeah, personally, if the government wants to register, automatically register people to vote or automatically register people for the draft, I think they should be able to, ultimately they'll justify whatever they want to justify. I think the libertarian position is, if you want to have, the government shouldn't be automatically registering anyone for anything without their consent, but ultimately, the government, they don't really care about consent. Just look at how they can justify taking your taxpayer dollars and throwing them whatever they want to without you saying, without you having a say at all, pretty much. I guess you could say voting, but, voting doesn't really matter. If voting really mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. So I think that's important to remember as well. Next, we have Finland ends homelessness by providing shelter for all in need, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that looks like a screenshot of a tweet or something. In Finland, the number of homeless people has fallen sharply. Those affected receive a small apartment and counseling with no preconditions. 4 out of 5 people affected make their way back into a stable life, and all this is cheaper than accepting homelessness. And yeah, personally, I think if people do want to have taxpayer dollars fund helping homeless people, I think they should be able to, but I don't think they should be forced to do so if they don't want to. I think that's important to remember as well. I do think it's probably better use of taxpayer dollars than a lot of other things, but ultimately, like everything else, just because it sounds good doesn't make it mean it's actually perfect. And also, people shouldn't, even if it is good and as perfect as it can be, that doesn't mean people should be forced to fund it if they don't want to. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have U.S. deterrence has vanished as Trump was duped into Iran war by Israel, with Iran and China proving New World Order defying threats, posted by a Acadian academic, and that looks like a screenshot of a tweet they have from open source intel. Chinese Defense Minister Admiral Dong Jun, in a message for the Trump amendment to the U.S. Navy, our ships are moving in and out of the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. We have trade and energy agreements with Iran. We will respect and honor those agreements and expect others not to interfere in our affairs. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, and it is open for us. And yeah, personally, if China wants to get involved, I think they should be able to. Every country is going to want to justify whatever they want to. I personally don't really care for China until you don't care for the U.S., but ultimately, it's just one evil empire versus another, I would say. In practice, the United States might be the land of the free, but it's just another evil empire that's set on policing the globe, just like China is, and I would say Russia is as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Federal Reserve. Without tariffs, inflation would have dropped to pre-pandemic levels during 2025, from Reason.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, I personally don't the Federal Reserve can be biased in its own right, but I personally, I do think inflation would have dropped a little more without the tariffs. But ultimately, the government's going to justify putting whatever tariffs it wants to, and ultimately there's nothing you can do about it. Tariffs are just another form of taxes. And as I say, taxation is inherently theft. But Reddit only doesn't care about tariffs because they're Trump coded rather than Democrat coded. If you told them we got to get rid of all taxes, they'll say that's a libertarian pipe dream. And just go to show you, they only care about in-group, out-group. If tariffs were in-group coded rather than out-group coded, they would think they're the greatest thing ever. But since they're out-group coded rather than in-group coded currently, they think they're the worst thing ever. Next, we have Melania Trump's Epstein announcement deepens a year of confusion, from Salon.com, posted by The Way to Beauty. And yeah, personally, I don't really care about the elite class and their Epstein stuff, but I don't think any of them will be held accountable. It's like the Panama Papers from 10 years ago. The Panama Papers said a lot of the elite class were committing tax evasion in Panama, and ultimately pretty much none of them were held accountable. I think one of the former prime ministers of Iceland resigned or something, or I think, but it's the same with this one. They might have a fall guy or two, like that one former British prince, but the vast majority of them aren't going to be held accountable at all, and eventually people will just move on to whatever the next thing is. Next, we have thoughts on libertarianism about also being anti-corporatism, posted by the Owl One, and they said, so it seems a lot of people automatically believe that libertarianism equals unfettered capitalism, and this is true for a lot of libertarians. Personally, I'm very anti-authoritarian in every sense. I think a corporation can trample a person's rights just the same as any tyrannical government, and yes, I know libertarian left is a thing, but I'm not fully market leftist either. And I would agree with that, just because corporations are private enterprises rather than public enterprises doesn't mean they can't be authoritarian. libertarian. But that being said, you're forced to interact with the government and forced to obey its laws, regardless of what you think. Well, with a private corporation, you're not forced to interact with it if you don't want to, and I think that's an important distinction to make as well. So ultimately, I would say the libertarian position is, if a company gets to be too big and too centralized, the libertarian position is you got to have capitalism has to have competition, otherwise it's just corporatism. And I think the libertarian position is to be anti-corporatism and anti-monopoly, as long as it's not a natural monopoly, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. If the monopoly is the natural monopoly done for through the market, I think that's fine. Something like Google, a lot of people use Google voluntarily. They're not forced to use Google if they don't want to, and they have pretty much a monopoly on the search engine industry. And so, ultimately, but people are free to use Bing or what's the other one, DuckDuckGo as well, or any other search engine that they feel like. So, ultimately, as long as the monopoly is something that's more natural than unnatural, I think that libertarian position is that's okay. But I definitely do think big business and big government do need to be held accountable for how in bed they are with each other, and that's my thoughts there. Next, we have Netanyahu reveals Trump reports him every day from Newsweek.com, hosted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the No Filter News subreddit. And yeah, personally, it just goes to show you who's really running the show, the special interest groups and the deep state, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump's just a figurehead to keep people distracted with whatever schizo post he has on any given day, and that's very much how politics is these days. A lot of electoral politics is just pretty much WWE. It's a distraction for the rubes and the marks. Well, the real power is behind the scenes, I would say. Next, we have Mamdani plans to open city-owned grocery store in East Harlem from Lemon Limelight, and they said from the New York Times, Mayor Zoran Mamdani announced on Sunday that New York City will open a city-owned grocery store in East Harlem and Manhattan by the end of his first term. The mayor wants to spend roughly $30 million to build a store at La Marqueta, a city-owned marketplace under elevated train tracks. Mr. Mamdani said he wanted to go to the new grocery store to offer discounts on basic groceries and provide quality jobs. The city will waive rent and real estate taxes for the store. It will be on an empty lot and will not displace current vendors. Is this a good idea? I personally think, the government should be as not involved in everything as possible. So I personally think, we need to have privately run grocery stores rather than city-owned grocery stores. But ultimately, if the government wants to throw money at running its own grocery store, ultimately there's nothing you can really do about it. They're the ones in the authority, you aren't. But ultimately, I think libertarian position is, you have to have the private sector do that, not the public sector. Next, we have Trump's handler, apartheid Israeli regime Prime Minister Netanyahu, reveals POTUS subserviently reports to him every day, posted by a Canadian academic. That looks like a screenshot of the headline from the New Republic. Netanyahu reveals Trump reports to him every day on Iran. And yeah, just goes to show you, Netanyahu is really the one running the show. It's always people are the president's just a figurehead a lot of the time. The real power lies in the special interest groups like IPAC and the other lobbyist groups, and also the deep state agencies like CIA, NSA, FBI, and all that. Next, we have a federal judge dismisses Trump's defamation lawsuit against Wall Street Journal from Reason.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, if the federal judge wants to dismiss Trump's defamation lawsuit, I think they should be able to. Ultimately, defamation is, I think, libertarian position to be against defamation at all as a thing at all, because ultimately all defamation is free speech. Just because you defame someone or lie about them or slander them, doesn't mean it's not free speech what you're doing. You shouldn't be lying and slandering and defaming people, I would say, but ultimately that's a free speech thing rather than something the government should be in control of, I would say. Next we have, on Republicans 25, 45, 47, posted by Cowdog Curmudgeon, posted by, and that the screenshot of a true from Donald Trump. That was a picture of Donald Trump as Jesus healing a sick man, it looks like. That it was an AI-generated picture he posted on his True Social. He said, I was just being a doctor there, but I think everyone knows that he's supposed to be Jesus, really. And personally, I would say the libertarian position is, at this point you've put up with Donald Trump's schizo bullshit for roughly 4,000 days since he went down the gold escalator. I think I checked yesterday. It was like 3,954 days since he first announced he was running in 2016. Well, it was 2015, but before the 2016 election. And eventually, you'll just cope with all whatever schizo bullshit he posts on any given day. And ultimately, if you do ever get him removed from office or impeached, you'll just move on to the next boogeyman. It will go from orange man bad to hillbilly man bad, and then eventually maybe you'll get a Democrat in there like a Gavin Newsom. Speaking of Gavin Newsom, I did a post to the anarcho-capitalism sub recently. Says looks like it's time to update the lyrics to a Dead Kennedys classic. and I said I did what's the song, California Uber Alice, but instead of referencing Jerry Brown, I referenced Gavin Newsom and replaced the lyrics there. And it just goes to show eventually there's always going to be some boogeyman in power, but ultimately it's just really a distraction. The president's a figurehead, and Trump's very good at always finding a way to distract people, whatever his bullshit of the day or week is. Last week it was or Easter it was the praise be to Allah, we're gonna blow up all the fucking bridges and power plants, and this week it's I'm posting a picture of myself as Jesus. And ultimately Trump's very good at, I would say, the distraction from what's really going on. He'll get all these people distracted, but from whatever his schizo bullshit of the week is, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Eventually people just move on to whatever the next thing is, and that's very much how a lot of people do these days. It's whatever the current thing is, and yeah, that's my fault. It's there. Next, we have Michigan lawmakers withdraw age verification bill from posted by Amogus Devilman, and that's across from the FOS Libertarian subreddit. And yeah, personally, and it's like a video from the Lundke Journal, I guess it is, Lundke Journal. And yeah, personally, I do think a lot of kids shouldn't be online, a lot of websites, because there's some stuff that can really screw them up on there. But I think it should be the parent or guardian's decision of what websites they can and can't use rather than the state. So I definitely do think libertarian business is as good as a verification bill was withdrawn. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.